You've got to see this key finding that I found. If a wide receiver hits certain production marks in his first 2 years, he'll have a 93% chance to finish as a top 24 receiver at some point in his career. Now, here's the interesting part. The wide receivers that we're talking about today have hit these marks, but are going on average as the 35th wide receivers in drafts. These are the exact guys you need to draft before they break out in 2023. And let's begin with Falcons wide receiver Drake London, the first receiver taken in the draft last year, who quietly had a great rookie year. What you're seeing right now is last year's wide receiver efficiency, yards per route run ranked, and Drake London was tied for 13th, right around Keenan Allen. He was above Amari Cooper and guys like Jamar Chase. And that's not all, because he was 32nd in target rate, his targets per route run, which was second in the NFL, only behind Devontae Adams. And this metric typically holds steady or improves as you gain more experience, which means London's about to explode. And one more thing, last year London only scored 4 touchdowns, but based on his usage, he was actually expected to score 8, the 10th most in the league. And he finished 20th in expected points amongst wide receivers, which is better than where he's currently going in drafts right now. And perhaps the most impressive part is he did this in arguably the worst situation you could have been in. At least the second worst situation, Atlanta threw just 24.4 times per game, ranking 31st in the NFL last year. And his quarterback for a lot of the year was Marcus Mariota, who was 31st in completions percentage, 33rd in deep ball accuracy. I mean, he just had no help at the position. So much so that over 25% of his targets weren't even catchable, which makes the logic here pretty simple. Any increase in pass volume or efficiency gives London top 10 upside. He currently goes as the wide receiver 25 in drafts. Guys like DJ Moore and Keenan Allen go ahead of him, and I'd just rather have Drake London. All right, let's go from the NFC and the Falcons to the AFC and the Kansas City Chiefs. And that takes us to Kadarius Toney, who has had a rough start to his career. As he enters year 3, he has missed 15 games in his first 2 seasons, about 44% of his games due to injury. And some of those injuries could be put in quotes, as he tried to get out of the New York Giants situation last year, and a lot of speculations were that he wasn't actually injured, but still, he has been hobbled in the first 2 years. But now this year looks appealing because, quite simply, he's Patrick Mahomes' #1 wide receiver. I mean, here is his competition right now on the depth chart. You're definitely going to have MVS out there. He's getting paid a decent amount of money and has a specific role on the outside. But as we go a little bit deeper, the only key add they made was Rashee Rice. And Rice was a 2nd-round pick by them, and he's got a lot of positives to actually like. Look, the size is there, 6 foot, 200 pounds. These are his player profile or workout metrics. The burst, obviously elite, 95th percentile. The catch radius, fantastic, 85th percentile, and above average speed and agility. And then last year, he showed the production with over 1,300 yards, over 30% of SMU's targets, and elite metrics. So all of these things are nice. I actually think he has a chance to be a good fantasy option where he goes right now, but there are concerns. Now, one of those concerns is he's not NFL proven like Toney. Toney has hit some clear efficiency marks and elite efficiency marks, which is why he's in this video. And then his other competition piece is Sky Moore. And I'm not that concerned about Sky Moore. A lot of you might have thought he might have been the Chiefs receiver I was talking about in this video. I am not, and here's why. Let's look at his routes run for starters. How many routes he's out there actually in a game. As you would expect as a rookie to start the year, look, it's not that great, 6.04, but then it picks up a little bit. He's getting into the 13s. He starts to fumble. He looks really raw out there in his routes, and on film, it doesn't look great. It spikes at 15 routes. He actually runs 26 in the AFC Championship, but that's because 3 of the receivers were injured for the Chiefs. But it boils down to Sky Moore just looking not NFL ready and only playing 28% of the snaps for the Chiefs. And then the following year, after they drafted him last year, they have to go out and spend another 2nd-round pick on Rashee Rice. That doesn't show confidence in Moore. So your simple takeaway is that Kadarius Toney is about to break out. In his first 2 years in the NFL, he has a target rate, his targets per route run, of 29%, which is top 10 amongst all receivers during that time. He is just waiting to explode, and now he has the opportunity, assuming he could stay healthy. He currently goes in the 6th round of drafts. I think Treylon Burks is also a solid pick in this range, but I prefer Toney over all the names on the screen with George Pickens and even the rookie Jordan Addison, because it looks like right now Kadarius Toney is a #1 receiver for Patrick Mahomes. Now let's jump back to the NFC, where we look at a brand new offense, basically because there's a new quarterback there for the first time in a while in Green Bay. And that player we'll discuss is Christian Watson, who, look, he was actually injured. Not a lot of people remember this, but 2 pretty significant injuries to start last year. And here are those specific injuries. In June, during rookie minicamp, he actually had to have a minor knee surgery to clear up some stuff going on with his knee. And then in September, right as the season was starting, he has a hamstring pull that takes him basically months to get back full and healthy. And he actually admitted after the season that he was playing through this because he was a rookie and he just wanted to make the most of his opportunity. So that's maybe why it took him a little bit longer to break out. 2 setbacks health-wise. But oh boy, when this guy broke out, he popped off. Over the final 9 weeks of the season, Christian Watson ranked 7th in fantasy points. And look at the names he's around. Amon-Ra St. Brown, AJ Brown, CeeDee Lamb. I mean, Tyreek Hill is on this list. These are all top 10 receivers entering this year. But despite the success, he currently goes right now as the wide receiver 19 in drafts. And in a lot of drafts I've been drafting in, I usually see him around the wide receiver 22 still hanging around on the board. And this is a mistake because Watson was 12th in wide receiver efficiency as a rookie, and he led all receivers, not just rookies, in fantasy points per target. And these metrics correlate strongly with future fantasy and NFL success. Now, there is one key issue we must discuss, and that's that he's got a new quarterback in Jordan Love. Look, this will create some uncertainty around Watson's outlook, but Love is a former first-round pick, somebody the Packers traded up for. The current expectation based on where Christian Watson is drafted in the 4th round is that Love is like a bottom 3 quarterback in the league. And because of that expectation that Love's just automatically going to be bad, well, you're getting Watson as an extreme value, because if Love is average or slightly below average or even like 20th best in the league, well, you're going to get a huge season out of Watson. Outside of Watson's talent and athleticism and dynamite skill set that we saw as a rookie, well, he just doesn't have competition. His biggest competition is who? Romeo Doubs, who was like 90th in wide receiver efficiency last year. Then it's 2 rookies who I think have some upside in Dontavius Wicks and Jaden Reed, but there's no competition for targets. And this is a cool chart from Fantasy Life and Dwayne McFarlane I was interacting with on Twitter. It basically shows Christian Watson and the 3-year average of wide receiver 1, 2, and 3s. And Christian Watson right now is producing as if he's a wide receiver 1 when it comes to his yards per route run. When it comes to his air yard share, easily 40% compared to 31% for the average wide receiver 1. And his target share, 22%. Okay, that's a little bit lower. Wide receiver 1 is 25%, but that's if he finishes as a top 12 guy, and we're expecting more targets this year. So all of this looks lovely for Watson. I think Watson is currently the best 4th round pick in drafts at the wide receiver position. There's a couple of running backs who go there that are also nice. Now let's move back to the AFC. And we'll have a conversation around Treylon Burks, who this big 200 and nearly 30-pound wide receiver had a nice offseason. And it has nothing to do with what he did, but it's the lack of what the Tennessee Titans did. This is their draft. They had 6 picks, and they only spent the receiver on 7th round pick Colton Dowell. He is no threat. And then these are the players that they signed. There's Colton Dowell, like we talked about. They signed their rookie. They re-signed Nick Westbrook, not a threat. The only guy they brought in, a 30-plus-year-old Chris Moore, who's basically been a glorified special teams player most of his career. So all this is great news for Treylon Burks, who last year as a rookie was actually top 30 in wide receiver efficiency, 30% better than the average rookie receiver. And his production got better as he saw more experience, which is something that we hope translates to this year. Over these final 5 games right here, he finished as a top 22 wide receiver 3 times, and he actually finished his best performance, 18.1 points, a top 12 receiver. And it's important that we break down into that game a little more, because this was against the Packers with Jair Alexander covering him for most of the game. He ends up going out there and putting up 7 catches for 111 yards, showing that he is a true alpha number 1 receiver for this team. And now there's nobody out there in Tennessee with Robert Woods gone to give him any form of competition. So this is where he currently goes in drafts. We showed it a little bit earlier. I would much rather have him over George Pickens and DeAndre Swift. Depending on the position you need, I think Isaiah Pacheco is a fair player to take over Burks if you want running back there. But this is the type of range that I think you could definitely be taking him, or even a little earlier. Now, when you think breakout players, you might not think about this next guy, but look, he's in line for a 3rd-year breakout. And that's the Texans wide receiver Nico Collins, who quietly won the offseason because the Texans didn't add anybody threatening. When you look at the NFL draft, they added 3rd-round pick Nathaniel Dell, wide receiver. Okay, we'll talk more on that in a second. And 6th-round pick Xavier Hutchinson, who I actually thought was a solid prospect, but as he goes in the 6th round, not really a threat. So here's Nathaniel Dell out of Houston. He ends up staying in Houston, college, and the NFL now for Nathaniel Dell, but he's 5'8" and 165 pounds. I mean, this might be like a Tavon Austin gadget player. He's not a threat to Nico Collins. And in terms of players that they signed, Steven Sims Jr., basically a backup. Noah Brown, he's been like the wide receiver 4 for the Cowboys for a while, basically a backup. Robert Woods, now 30-plus years old, coming off of career worst efficiency. None of these guys are threatening. Now, a final player they added, probably the best player that they added, was Dalton Schultz. But even Dalton Schultz, he was kind of like a system tight end, if you will. He was not that athletic. He didn't really do much after the catch. He was actually 17th in tight end efficiency, meaning that he was an average tight end. So this is not a threat to a Nico Collins. Now, here's what you need to know about Collins. Last year, his efficiency improved in a really bad and not great offense. 1.77 yards per route run, was 44th in the NFL, but it was a 38% increase. And this type of increase from year 1 to 2 is normally what we see from year 3 breakout receivers, which Collins could be this year. But now this is the best part. Despite being his team's clear and obvious, we've talked about it now, number 1 receiver, Collins still goes in round 12 of drafts, around Michael Gallup, the wide receiver 3 for the Cowboys, Jalen Hyatt. He might be the wide receiver 5 for all we know for the New York Giants. And this is all strange because the Texans have a quarterback upgrade in CJ Stroud, who is the complete opposite of what they had last year at quarterback in Davis Mills, because Stroud is thought to be the most accurate rookie quarterback in quite some time. Look at this, 72% completion, 66%. His efficiency, yards per attempt, over over 10, 9.5, anything over like 7 or 8 in college is fantastic. He is set to deliver. So take Collins before your friends do, and then take this next Washington Commanders wide receiver. Come on down, Jahan Dotson, who is the next breakout candidate that we have to talk about and one of the best values in fantasy drafts right now. And now these are his game logs for Jahan Dotson. He played in 12 games, and let's look at his fantasy points. Right here, 17th, that's where he finished that week. So he was the 17th wide receiver, 20th, 25th. How many times did he finish as a top 25 guy? Look at this to close the season out. 3 times in his final 5 games. So overall, he starts the year with 3 top 25 performances, then gets hurt, then he's finally healthy, and he finishes it with 3. So 50% of his games, this guy was a top 25 receiver as a rookie. But the most interesting part was his tape. He was constantly getting open, and he only played 20% of the time out of the slot. So he was on the outside dominating with big play upside. And here's how that kind of translated. He was 14th in the NFL in yards per target, and he was 32nd with 16 deep targets despite missing 5 games. He was on pace to be top 20 in this metric as well. He might already be a top 10 route runner in the NFL. Now, his concerns were his quarterbacks. Dotson ranked just 78th in catchable targets last year. 30% of his targets were not even catchable. And now look, his quarterback situation for this year isn't that great either, but it can't get much worse. Sam Howell might have some uncapped potential and upside we don't know about. And Jacoby Brissett completed 66% of his passes last year, above average, and was around average in yards per attempt his quarterback efficiency. So it's not nearly as worse as what he had last year. I think that Jahan Dotson, like I said earlier, is one of the best picks that you can get currently in fantasy drafts. But there's still one guy left, and he's the best breakout receiver we haven't talked about yet. But before we get there, I want to let you know about the fantasy blueprint, because if you want to win your fantasy league, this tool has everything you need to do just that and smack around your friends. It is very simple and easy to get. You just click the link in the description below, follow the 2 simple steps, and you'll have it in a matter of moments. And if you don't make your fantasy playoffs, I'll refund the payment. Whether it's $5 or $10, depending on the time of year that you're signing up, I'll refund it. If you don't make your fantasy playoffs, no questions asked. This is a risk-free offer for you to get to your fantasy playoffs and win your championship. So check out the fantasy blueprint down below. If you have any questions, please let me know. And just to let you know, 99.9% of people didn't reach out for a refund last year because they were in their fantasy playoffs pushing towards a championship. Now, the best breakout wide receiver is Chris Olave, and a lot of you, including myself, might already think he broke out. He had over 1,000 yards last year, but he finished as the wide receiver 25. Just missed that wide receiver 24 cutoff as a wide receiver 1 or wide receiver 2 in fantasy. But all of the underlying data was excellent and suggests a potential top 10 year for Olave now. Because Olave was 10th in wide receiver efficiency as a rookie and earned the 2nd most targets versus man coverage amongst all receivers, not just rookies. Translation, he was dominant at beating NFL quarterbacks at just 22 years old. And he was very quietly being used often downfield, 9th in average depth of targets, and he was 4th in deep targets despite missing 2 games and leaving 2 games early. His quarterback is now Derek Carr, who over the last 3 years ranked 6th in deep attempts and 4th in deep touchdowns of 20+ yards. So it's a nice little recipe for Olave to have success this year, but there is some new additions to the wide receiver core. And for the most part, they're old faces. I mean, they added some guys in the draft like A.T. Perry. They signed James Washington and Bryan Edwards, but Michael Thomas is the one face I want to talk about because he has the experience. Just a few years ago, he had one of the best wide receiver seasons we've ever seen, the overall wide receiver 1. But those days are probably over because over the last 2 years, he's only played in 3 games and 7 games, and then we saw him none at all in 2021. He's missed 70% of his games the last 3 years. That's not good at all. Now, this man right here is interesting, and he actually almost mixed this video since he was a rookie last year in Rashid Shaheed, who was top 10 in wide receiver efficiency, yards per route run last year. And you'll probably see a little bit more about him in future videos. I think he could actually give some sort of a push to this wide receiver core, but Olave is head and shoulders better than him. I currently believe that Chris Olave is the best 3rd round receiver you can draft and arguably the best 3rd round pick overall. I'd rather have him over Nick Chubb. I'd rather have him over the quarterbacks in Josh Allen, Hurts, and Mahomes just based on the way that I draft. So these are the clear breakout wide receivers, the 2nd and 3rd year receivers entering 2023. But if you want to know the guys that you need to avoid at the wide receiver position, well, then you better make sure you check out this video right here before your silly old friends do. And if you want to stay ahead of those foolish friends, well, then be sure that you hit the subscribe button to stay up to date on all the relevant information you need to know to smack them around.